We'll be joined a little bit later on by Corning Deputy Mayor and candidate for Steuben County Legislator, Allison Hunt. She'll be coming up in a little bit. So if you have any questions for her, please contact me there, and we'll try as soon as possible to ask her those questions. Okay, let's start here. So as I mentioned with Israel, I mean, coming from the New York Post, the Hamas killed. I know it's early, but I know you've been following it too. The videos are disturbing, the photos are disturbing, but in a way, obviously necessary to almost force yourself to realize just how brutal Hamas has been. And the thought that some media outlets won't call it terrorism, and some, well, maybe we'll get to that. Some that, well, let's hold off here. Hamas, before I get worked up, Hamas kills 40 babies and children, some being beheaded in front of their families. Again, it's graphic. I would recommend that you do the research yourself. This is coming from the New York Post, but it is elsewhere. CNN had a piece about it earlier as well. Men, women, children, hands bound, shot, executed, heads cut off. Now, the first plane carrying U.S. armament has arrived in Israel, according to Fox News. It's a key part of regional security and stability, the IDF has said. The first plane carrying U.S. armaments landed in Israel sometime Tuesday evening. That's according to the Israel Defense Forces. The Biden administration began delivering munitions to Israel this week as the country wages war with Hamas terrorist fighters. The armaments, quote, are designed to facilitate significant military operations and increase preparedness for other scenarios. The IDF released a statement saying, "We are grateful for the U.S. backing and assistance to the IDF and to the state of Israel in general during this challenging period. Our common enemies know that the cooperation between our militaries is stronger than ever and is a key part in ensuring regional security and stability." Now, Biden did give the speech yesterday, speaking from the White House. He did shun the calls to de-escalate, and he vowed that the United States has Israel's back as it prepares for ground war with Hamas. "We must be crystal clear," said the president. "We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's rights to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people." The president confirmed also, this is also very troubling amongst a list of troubling information. The president confirmed that 14 Americans have been killed in the attacks and that a number of others are being held hostage in Gaza. He added that the U.S. will work with its Israel counterparts to safely free them. Quote, "Let there be no doubt. The United States has Israel's back. We're with Israel. Let's make no mistake." There is some criticism. We'll talk about it because it's not necessarily criticism of what the president said. It's criticism of perhaps what he didn't say, mentioning Iran, for instance, or calling out anti-Semitism. I know there's been college campuses are a hotbed for this anti-Semitism, and I think it's starting to open some people's eyes to what's really been there in the forefront, but perhaps not reported on, or perhaps not part of regular conversation. So hopefully we get a chance to talk about all of that. I know we're starting off very heavy this morning, but please weigh in on what you're seeing, and we have to take a short break. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Kevin McCarthy and others have talked about the fact that there could be terrorist cells here in the United States that we're not even aware of. So this comment, "I too have felt more vulnerable, I must say. The decisions this administration has made, and more importantly, haven't made, speak volumes on where they stand and clearly have shown their hand. We don't know who is here and who they are, but we certainly know what they are capable of, And the latest attack on Israel is sickening beyond words, and we have Americans cheering because of their ignorance. It's shameful. It is very shameful. I could not agree more." Thank you for that comment. And you've got rallies being started, not just in New York City, but on college campuses. Not a lot. Well, I shouldn't say not a lot. People not calling out this anti-Semitism. That was one of the criticisms that I think it was Michael Goodwin from the New York Post had about the president's speech. Not about what the president said in the speech. The speech itself was good. It's about what was omitted. Now, CNN said that the president confirms U.S. citizens are among Hamas hostages, like I mentioned earlier, in sharp condemnation of attacks. He did use words like abhorrent, and the brutality of Hamas's bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. But Michael Goodwin, in his piece, and I would love to hear your take on this, let me put it up on the screen, saying, again, not about, I thought he was very positive about the speech overall until he mentions that the president pulled punches on anti-Semitism in Iran. There was much good and nothing wrong with what Joe Biden said in his short speech. The problem is what he didn't say. Quote, there are moments in this life when pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed on the world. The people of Israel lived through one such moment this weekend. He seemed genuinely outraged in recounting the horrors that have shocked the world, including the killing of infants in their mother's arms, grandparents in wheelchairs, Holocaust survivors abducted and held hostage. Hostages who Hamas has now threatened to execute in violation of every code of human morality. It is abhorrent. He thankfully pulled no punches about Hamas, correctly labeling its brutality as the definition of terrorism. He also confirmed our support with Israel numerous times. So again, plenty of good to take away from this speech. Nothing specifically wrong except for, according to Michael Goodwin, what was omitted. Because he did not lay out potential stakes for the United States and mention two other major elements related to the attack. The speech comes off as narrow and small for this moment. For example, the skirmishes with Hezbollah across the Lebanon border heighten the chance the Jewish state soon will be fighting on two fronts. But these are, what Michael Goodwin says is noteworthy before we take our break. First, the widespread expression of anti-Semitism across the U.S., Europe, and elsewhere are outlandish, and Biden should have denounced them. It's not just the appearance of Nazi symbols at a Manhattan demonstration or a large crowd chanting horrible things that I'd rather not repeat on the air outside the Sydney Opera House in Australia. Those expressions of the world's oldest hatred are repugnant, but so is the wide public support for Hamas, as if its slaughter of innocent civilians was a form of self-defense. And unfortunately, we talked about this on Monday's show, that was going to come where Israel would be to blame for protecting themselves. And this is a really good piece. It's lengthy. I don't want to run late because I know we're going to be spending some time with Allison. But he said the second part that was omitted, of course, was Iran being a major funder. The head of the snake is in Tehran. Biden knows it. Otherwise, why send the carrier group? All the more reason, then, why a discussion of Iran's role deserved to be in Tuesday's speech. The president must be honest with Americans because they deserve it. And because he needs, there's our guest right now. Tuesday, October 17th at 7 p.m. at the Coopers Plains Long Acres Department. That's fire department, I should say. 210 Main Street in Painted Post. And the topic is the request to allow chickens in residential districts. So if you are pro or con on that topic, that is a must-attend event. Public information meeting, Tuesday, October 17th. Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, our guest, Allison Hunt.
Meeting a lot of people I've already met before, and just talking about the issues that are important to them.
What are you up to, like seeing them 2-3 times already?
Yeah, some people, I actually just started my second round in the 5th Ward last night. So some people are like, oh yeah, I remember talking to you, 6 weeks ago. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, a lot has changed.
They do. Yeah, exactly.
And I know I've asked you this every time, but what has been the biggest issue?
So the biggest issue really has been talking about crime, homelessness. I've heard that quite a bit. Yeah. It does vary based on the area of the city that you're in. I've knocked everywhere in the city at this point, especially on the north side. I'm hearing that more. I do hear a little bit on the south side as well. But people are concerned about how we're going to deal with either the homeless situation or not feeling as safe.
Right. And how do we I mean, this isn't even a question for you. I think it's a question for the whole state dealing with the homeless issue.
It is. It's on the rise everywhere, and people are talking about, obviously, the flux of immigrants coming into New York City as well and where those folks are going to end up. It's really a conversation we need to have statewide. That's something I plan to advocate for. But here in Steuben County, we need to figure out how we bring the resources that we have at the county level to those folks wherever they're placed in the county. And obviously, we are required to provide homeless housing. It's the right thing to do.
Sure.
And so, we want to get those people back on their feet, though. We don't want them to remain in that housing. We want them
Right.
to have, hope for the future. And so I think we need to get those services connected with those people and give them, as they say, a hand up.
Right, and I know, and you mentioned homelessness, but we talk about public safety here on the program so often, seems like almost every interview, but there obviously is a major concern, again, throughout the whole state about public safety because of the bail reform laws and the like. How do we deal with it?
There's, I think we need to advocate again to the state level. The bail reform is not something that we can change locally.
Right, exactly.
But we need to do as much as we can to support our law enforcement with training, with the resources, with the appropriate staffing level. That's something I am adamant about here in the city. I have been. When we renegotiated our union contract, I requested raises,
Sure.
Specifically for our police department especially, because we've had trouble recruiting. And they're having trouble recruiting in Steuben County with the sheriff's office as well. We need to be competitive. So that we make sure we have the right amount of law enforcement here to enforce the laws that we can enforce. Now, I understand the catch and release.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to me. It's frustrating to all the residents I talk to.
And to law enforcement.
To law enforcement, too. And they want to be as best prepared as possible. They just want to do the right thing. And they're frustrated when they see these people day after day. They arrested them yesterday, and they might see them the next day.
Yes. And then you have a scenario where, and I know I've mentioned a million times, where they're still filling out the paperwork and that person's on the street.
Exactly.
And then they wonder, not they, but then Albany maybe wonders why recruitment issues are a problem.
Absolutely. We need the public support for law enforcement. And I've been very public about my support of law enforcement.
Right.
And I've experienced a little bit of lashback for that, actually.
That's interesting.
Only because some people say that I made a statement about people feeling less safe in the city. And I said I myself feel less safe in the city. I'm a runner. I used to go out early in the morning to do my training runs. Not running quite as much now. But, thinking about what I'm going to experience if I go out at 4 a.m. in the morning in the city.
Yes.
And I don't have the same feeling of safety that I had when I first moved here. 13, 14 years ago, I didn't think about that kind of thing. And I hear that from my neighbors, too. I hear that going around and talking to people in the city.
Well, and I'm not a resident, but I've worked here on Market Street for almost 20 years, and it's been quick turnaround within the last few years where I agree, you don't feel safe necessarily in the morning walking from the parking garage, perhaps, to work. So I've heard it from a lot of people.
I have, too. And that's why I understand people want to see the statistics within the city, and I've certainly reached out to the city to request that information as well. But you can't ignore how people feel. That's also very important.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't know how to tie this in without me sounding biased, but let's talk for a moment about the recent decision by the Steuben County Legislature, which you're running for, about Sheriff Allard.
Yeah, I will say I was shocked by that vote. I would have voted no to both of those resolutions.
Sure.
I can't say I have all the information that the legislators have, but it's because it was behind closed doors. And I can promise you, as a legislator, I will be very transparent about that information. I think, especially with an elected official that's county-wide, public employee,
Right.
all the public employees on the county legislature, we as taxpayers deserve to have the information. If they're voting based on information they have in hand and we can't see that, we're not going to understand the situation. And so I really think they need to be a little more transparent with the reasons why they took that vote.
I agree. And the most comments we received were upset about what had happened, what the vote was, but also that we had no public comment. Because as you said, we vote for the sheriff.
And I'll be full disclosure, I'm a good friend of the sheriff. I think he's a very good man. He has done an excellent job for Steuben County. I think he's really brought the sheriff's department up to the next level. And I am proud of him for standing up for himself.
Yeah.
I think that we need to bring the light whatever information is there. If it's personal grudges, that needs to be disclosed.
Sure.
If there's actually an issue, that needs to be disclosed. But I guess we're going to find that out in a court of law, unfortunately. And I think it should have been figured out before it got to that point.
Well, I agree, but you can tell that November 9th, I want to say it's right around then when we'll actually know all the information, somewhere through there. And you can tell by the passion in Sheriff Allard that he wants people to know what's going on.
He does. He does. And that should say a lot about this situation. The person that's being the most visible, the most transparent, laid it all out in their court documents. And I'm no attorney,
Right.
so I'm going to let the court
Same
decide
here.
that.
Yeah.
But I think that he is doing an important service to the county. I think he is protecting the office of the sheriff. I watched his interview, and I totally understand wanting to protect it for the next person. He's not going to be sheriff for forever.
No.
And supporting law enforcement and talking about making sure that they have the liability protections they need. Speaking of supporting our law enforcement, they can't do their jobs if they don't feel supported. And if they think that every decision that they make is going to get them in a lawsuit,
Right.
people are just waiting to be able to sue law enforcement. So
And
I'm
think
concerned.
I think we know Sheriff Allard enough to know that there's no way he wants to end what has been an amazing legacy and go out the door with a sheriff's office that is less powerful or with less perhaps quote unquote respect. So you saw the passion when I talked to him on Thursday, and I think it's going to be an interesting re-election next year.
And I think that this situation made him more resolute that
Yes.
he would be running again next year
Yes.
because he is determined to make sure that this is seen through. And he has, like I said, he's done an excellent job. He's very well respected. Everything I've received in correspondence and from constituents is very positive. They're just concerned, and they don't want taxpayer money wasted on this situation, and they want the deputies and the sheriff to feel like that they can do their jobs.
Yeah, and because we've talked about it so often with again, going back to recruitment, when you just see constant attacks on law enforcement, this is just, and whatever happens, at the end of the day, whenever the smoke clears, I'm still saying this time right now makes you think that they are not welcomed, but they're not being respected in the way they should be.
Correct.
So can you stay with us for a break?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you so much for joining us. We're broadcasting live from Market Street in Corning, and we have as our guest this morning, Allison Hunt. Thanks again for staying with us through the break. We still have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
I think the biggest question, how's the family?
They're doing well. Actually, my husband and son are home right now, waking up.
Okay.
I got up a little bit before they did today, so
Yes, it is early.
they're doing wonderful. They come out door knocking with me sometimes, but anybody that has a 1-year-old will understand that the patience is pretty short. So usually
For
they're
politics.
short door knocking trips, and then I kind of go off on my own.
Makes
but
sense.
they're doing wonderful.
So everybody's wondering, what's your son going to be for Halloween?
You know what? We have an astronaut costume, but
Okay.
my husband wants him obviously to be a firefighter.
Of course, yeah.
He is
Yeah.
a volunteer firefighter,
Yeah.
so that's pretty important to him. So I think we might be doing an astronaut for there's a Halloween parade in Payne Post.
Yeah.
And I think where he's going to be on the night of, I think he's going to be a firefighter.
Okay, good. So now we get the tough questions out of the
Yes.
way. So something I was kind of fascinated when I was thinking about the vote for Sheriff Allard and just thinking about the legislature in general. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Corning, and this is probably something you've thought about a lot, Corning has been pretty much a Democrat stronghold in the legislature.
It has. The last person to get elected as a Republican to the county legislature for the city of Corning was Phil Palmisano in 2009.
Wow.
And for those of you that don't know, we have 2 county legislators that get
Yeah.
to represent the city of Corning. There's only one position open this year, but both have been Democrats for over 10 years.
That's interesting.
It is. I think personally, and I guess we'll let the voters decide.
Right, of course.
That it's better to have somebody from both parties. I think it's a more even conversation and fair representation of the city that is almost equally divided at this point in regards to Democrat, Republican. We have a lot of unaffiliated voters as well, which I think is fair in this day and age with all that's going on with both parties.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd like to see a little more of a balanced representation for
Yeah,
the city.
that
on
was
the
interesting
legislature.
when I got thinking about that. But wow, Phil Palmisano, that's funny.
It's a long time ago,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, and he's
I
done
kinda
such an
forgot it.
excellent job.
Yeah.
And he did for the city, and obviously is our assemblyman, and I think we see that he has had a good trajectory. So I can't blame him for going on to the next level. But I really feel that we need to have that balanced conversation, balanced approach at the local level.
I'm embarrassed to say I kind of forgot he was a legislator. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remembered it once
we
you
all have
just
to
said
start
it.
somewhere, Frank.
I know. That's exactly it. But no, I just forgot. That's amazing. So I don't know. I hope I'm not giving away any secrets here, but you got, I've heard some pretty amazing endorsements.
I do. I do. I've
you
been
announced them
very
yet?
fortunate. I have announced some of them.
Okay.
So obviously, Assemblyman Palmisano. I
Yeah.
have the Crystal City PBA. Probably one of my proudest.
Yeah.
Both of those, obviously. I also have 3 former mayors.
Oh, wow.
Al Lewis,
Yeah.
Rich Negri, and Jim Bacallis have
that's
all
great.
endorsed me. So.
That's
Yeah,
great.
some of that information has not been disclosed yet,
We'll
but
see. That's what-
it will be hitting mailboxes, and it's a very positive thing for me. I have a lot of respect for all of those folks and all of the work they've done here in the city. It's not easy being mayor. It's not easy being an elected official at any level, and it's not easy being in law enforcement. And the fact that they are recognizing the work that I've done here already, my experience at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level, I truly appreciate it, and I'm truly humbled. There's not a lot more I can say.
I know.
It's a humbling thing to have people like that just being willing to put their name forward for me.
Well, it's got to feel good too.
It does. It does. It also feels surreal sometimes because
Yeah.
sometimes when you ask these folks, you're like, who am I to
Right.
be asking for
Yeah.
your support?
Yeah,
And then when they say yes, it warms my heart.
Yeah. I saw recently the picture with Jim Bacallis. I look good. I like that.
Yeah, he is, for anybody that knows Jim, he tells it like it is.
Yeah.
And he gave me some great feedback, great advice. When he was running, he talked about the balance in the city, too, because he had the same experience. And wanted to make sure that there was equal representation. The legislature looked a little different back then, but
Sure.
yeah, so it was a great meeting.
Now, we probably should have started the program with this, but for those that aren't aware, because obviously we don't just reach Corning, we go much further. Who is it that can actually vote for you?
Anybody within the city limits that is registered to vote, and you have to register to vote by October 28th.
Yeah.
It's much later than it used to be, so
Yeah.
you still got time. But yeah, you have to live within the city limits and obviously be over 18, qualified voter.
Of course.
Yeah.
So before we go, how can someone help your campaign?
So they can reach out to me. I've got my Facebook page with all my contact information on it. It's Allison Hunt for Corning. Feel free to send me. I respond to text, phone calls, emails, Facebook Messenger, pretty much whatever way you can reach a person now. You can come to my house. I live on Dwight Avenue. It's public record. It's on the city website.
Sure.
So you'll be able to find me, or I'll be at your door soon again.
I was going to say,
So,
there's no
yeah.
sense going to your house because you're going to be at their house in no time.
You can also, you might see me driving around town. I've got
I saw
magnets
that.
on the side of my car, so you can even pull me over at this point. There's really not a way you can miss
I saw
me.
one the other day. I waved. I hope you saw me. I like them. They're nice. What would you say, just before we go, what would you say to the voters before they head to the booth, what they should know about you, and just maybe a kind of a last-minute pitch?
Yeah, no, I hope that they would consider how experienced I am and how I'd be able to hit the ground running. Like I said, I've been on the city council for 8 years.
Yeah, that's wild.
I have been the deputy mayor for 2. I have 14 years of experience in both the state and federal levels of government. And when it comes to the county level, you're advocating for a lot of policy changes at the state and federal level.
Right.
I understand how the system works. It's very frustrating, but I know who to call, who to contact to get
Right.
changes made. And I want to be an advocate for our city. I want to see positive changes. It's a great place to live, but
Yeah.
I think it could be even better. And I want to continue to raise my son here and have it be the best that it can be.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for being on the program this morning.
Thank you so much, Frank.
All right, we'll talk again soon. All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I didn't play my intro music because it sounds like we were having a little bit of trouble where it was bleeding over a couple times, so I didn't want to take away from all that we had to say. So thank you to Allison Hunt for being our guest, Corning Deputy Mayor, Corning City Council Member, and candidate for Steuben County Legislator. Really appreciate her being on the program this morning. Tomorrow on the show, we've got former Congressman Joe Sempolinski. All right. I'm just checking my messages here. Okay. Back on good audio. Okay, good. A couple little things. Hey, if you're new or not, maybe new to the program, but this week joining the program, we did get a brand new computer. We got the brand new roof view that we're really proud of. So there's a few little glitches we're working out, but I appreciate you saying that we may be having a little bit of a delay. So, okay, sorry. Got a little distracted there, but again, thank you to Allison Hunt. And I said, Joe Sempolinski is going to be on the program tomorrow, so make sure you tune in for that. We always have a lot of fun with Joe Sempolinski, as you know. We are going to cover everything under the sun. And now we've got to get back. Boy, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Bringing up what's happening in Israel, seeing the pictures. I'm sure you've watched the coverage. Now, Biden, again, his speech, as Michael Gilman said, nothing wrong about it. There was really some very good parts in the speech. But many are calling out this one from Michael Makowski and Blaze Mitzel, saying that Biden must get tough and stop appeasing Iran. And he specifically brings up, not just in the speech, or they, I should say, but the $6 billion in frozen assets that were unfrozen. Now they are, Iranian assets, I'm sorry. It's debatable whether Biden's recent unfreezing of $6 billion in Iranian assets in return for 5 American hostages helped fund the Hamas attack, as some Republicans claim. The attack took time to plan and the money may not have been spent yet, but Tehran could budget based on it. Yet the administration's extremely lax enforcement of existing sanctions has undeniably enabled Iran to reap tens of billions of dollars. So that coming from the New York Post. We also have another one. Attack on Israel. Why won't Biden even mention Iran's role? And this coming specifically from the New York Post editorial board. That telling omission made a mockery of his promise that we had Israel's back. Again, this is from the Post. Indeed, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan explicitly sought to play down the fact that Tehran's fingerprints are all over this attack. Quote, now, as to the question of whether Iran knew about this attack in advance or helped plan or direct this attack, we do not know or have confirmation of that, said Jake Sullivan. It's not a court of law. Hamas is Iran's creation, dependent on Tehran for funding and weapons studies, or weapon supplies. And it lacks the expertise for anything like the multifaceted assault it launched on Saturday. There simply can be no doubt that a terrorist group would or could attempt the kind of offensive it pulled off Saturday without the mullah's blessing and help. Cowardice won't cut it. This again, the New York Post editorial board. Tell the truth about what's going on, Mr. President, and be willing to reject the coddling of Iran you inherited from Barack Obama and realize the reality. It's Israel's enemy and this is an important point, and ours. So unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we're seeing this strain of anti-Semitism, whether it's on college campuses, from some in the media as well. One other comment about the freezing of assets. Democrats have joined some Republicans to push for the Biden administration to refreeze the $6 billion in Iranian assets. John Tester, kind of the normal names, John Tester and Joe Manchin. Okay. For instance, with MSNBC, did you see that Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC was interviewing an Israeli mother, a mother of a 12 and 16-year-old son? Those 12 and 16-year-old sons were abducted by Hamas terrorists. Well, Andrea Mitchell asked about the Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. That's when the mother grew visibly frustrated, saying, I can't be sympathetic to animal human beings. Well, they're not really human beings who came into my house, broke everything, stole everything, took my children from their bedrooms and took them to the Gaza Strip. Israel's never done that and will never do it. So there is no symmetry. I'm sorry. If you were dealing with a war who's between two countries, countries don't take children hostages. I'm sorry. It's against the laws of war. It's against humanity. It's against anything that we believe in. Every time we had missiles shot at us, I used to say to my children that they should be sympathetic towards the children of Gaza because they suffer a lot more than we do. And then she said she no longer feels that way. Dan Abrams on News Nation blasted MSNBC for victim blaming. And you do see that as a regular thing that the media has been doing is the victim blaming Israel. We had predicted it, and we had read from actually Frida Gittes from CNN, who said similar, that it's only a matter of time, and it really happened very quickly. Anti-Defamation League chairman Jonathan Greenblatt wondered if Hamas was writing the script for MSNBC. Andrea, how am I doing on time? Sorry, I just want to make sure that we're doing okay. Yeah, we're doing fine. Cool. New York Post, Andrea, we have a lot of New York Post articles today. Andrea Pizer says the liberal media refuses to call out Hamas for who they are, terrorists. Hamas terrorists' unprovoked massacre of more than 1,000 civilians in Israel left much of the world angry, grieving, and supporting retribution. But the so-called mainstream media has depressingly blamed Israel's government for the outrageous carnage. The New York Times did not use the words terrorist or terrorism on its front page coverage. The reason is plain. The paper of record excuses the monsters as justified freedom fighters. And unfortunately, we talk about the college education, specifically journalism school. Well, if you see this strain of anti-Semitism that's growing on college campuses, does this come as a surprise? And you have what New York Times, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here, is a very left-wing outlet, is known to be very left-wing, and there is that faction, that left-wing faction that has been, through the years, showing their anti-Semitism. Reuters, though, one-upped the New York Times on this, pointing the finger at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the savagery, while applauding the kidnappers and mass murderers for their supposed attempts at forging a Palestinian state. That's Reuters. But in reality, the killers of innocent men, women, children, and troops have done nothing but scuttle Israel's attempts at achieving peace. Yes, of course, because there's actually from CNN that says because of this, there's no doubt that the two-state solution is dead. And that's from Jason Greenblatt. We don't have the time. It's at CNN. We don't have the time to go to all of this piece. But the idea that with this cold-blooded killings, that they've made it clear, Hamas has made it clear, that there's no path for some type of two-state solution. Whether or not you wanted that, I'm just saying that's what's been pushed by the media for so long. Even if they had come up with a solution that was acceptable to both parties, though, there were still far too many Palestinians who were intent on massacring Jews and destroying the Jewish state of Israel. Okay, when we come back, I want to mention, as I talk about, because I know Black Lives Matter out of Chicago is under fire for a pro-Palestinian post. And it's sick. There's been a couple of various organizations that have been doing this. It's a post featuring paragliding terrorists in the background. And if you're not familiar, the paragliders who came into that festival and massacred those festival goers, many calling it disgusting and disgraceful. Former speechwriter and author Ava Klompus said, unapologetically standing with butchers and rapists. Congressional candidate Robbie Starbuck saying, Black Lives Matter Chicago, like many leftists, come out in support of slaughtering innocent people they don't like. It's very troubling. It's very disturbing. We're going to talk a little bit more about it when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. No theme song. We're working on that this morning. Just a little technical issue there, but nothing very serious. We were talking about this strain of anti-Semitism on college campuses, as well as a certain faction of the Democrat Party. Cornel West, a former Harvard professor, weighed in on the post by the Harvard students that put the blame on this on Israel. He said they're largely right, but they lacked nuance. You wonder what's being taught at these universities. I think you're quickly seeing. Okay, I'm just making sure because I know that my audio is going to go off here in just a second, but I'm going to be able to fix that. So, New York law student president, NYU law student president, says Israel, quote, bears full responsibility for this terrorist attack. Wow. The president of New York University's Student Bar Association sent a pro-Hamas message to the school Tuesday, cheering the terror attack on civilians and blaming Israel for the bloodshed. Okay, so you want to say, well, okay, one or two crazies. The list goes on and on. Right down the road, folks, Cornell University, and tell me this isn't shocking. The employee who did this from Cornell University is a diversity and inclusion director at Cornell. He has come under fire over disturbing social media posts supporting Hamas and dismissing the terrorist group's slaughter of innocent civilians as a resistance. Here's a good comment from a viewer. What else would you expect to happen when students are taught to hate the one country they actually get to express their freedom in? That's a good point. Wait till they lose that freedom. Who will they blame then? And isn't it interesting, many of these groups that are saying this now also are the ones that are calling for restriction on free speech because they want to decide, you say something they don't like, it hurts their feelings, whatever the case may be, they want to silence you and censor you. But then you can see statements like this being made, they don't find them offensive, so it should be fine with free speech because they get to be the judge, jury, and executioner on who gets free speech and not. But this, again, I definitely don't want to read what this guy had to say from Cornell. That's the one problem with bringing these stories to you. I don't like giving them the soapbox or to even quote them. But Darren Borders is his name, of the Cornell Johnson Graduate School of Management, voiced his support for the Palestinians and criticized Israel following the devastating invasion by Hamas. And so the Anti-Defamation League did release a statement saying, I was saddened to see post on social media Mr. Darren Borders, the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Cornell. I've attached 4 of his posts. It is evident that these posts incite hatred and promote terror at a time like this. This is especially saddening given Mr. Borders' position, which is one of influence and one that is expected to promote inclusion and harmony. I hope that Cornell will act to remove him from his post. As a Jew and the head of a financial advisory which manages funds for some of your donors, I will also be speaking to your donors personally and sharing his position and posts. I will also be sharing this with various organizations such as Anti-Defamation League. So I apologize. I thought that was a member of the Anti-Defamation League just sharing it. Those are some of the comments that they started to receive after those messages. But I mean, a lot of these professors, they're basically surrounded by yes men, right? Their whole life with the students. And so they can preach whatever they want to these students, and students can't fight back. And the administrators have all been, in that system forever. So they know they're essentially safe. They think they are. And they keep, to use a kind of a cliche, but they eventually, now a lot of them, fly a little too close to the sun. Now, will this guy have any repercussion? Time will tell. I truly have my doubts, but that leads, all of this and much more, we didn't have time to get to all of it, leads to a quote by Jake Tapper, of all people. CNN's Jake Tapper, when we come back. So stay with us. Our last break here on Frankly Speaking. Come back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we're going to go quick on our way out the door here. So CNN's Jake Tapper, after seeing a lot of the comments, seeing a lot of the anti-Israel protests, saying, these last few days have been a real eye-opening period for a lot of people, a lot of Democrats and a lot of progressives in terms of anti-Semitism on the left. A lot of people who seemed more shocked, at dehumanizing language to describe Hamas than what Hamas actually perpetrated on Saturday. And his guest, Representative Elisa Stolkin, said, yeah, I mean, look, anti-Semitism should be stamped out whether it is on the right or on the left. Is it eye-opening? This has been something that, yes, granted, is not covered by the mainstream media, but has been a common not talking point, but a common conversation that people have had when you see some of the posts from like members of the squad, for instance. Okay, again, we're going to go quick now. We only got a minute. Biden's approval is at the near lowest of his term as immigration concerns rise. This is according to Reuters. While the economy is a perennial top concern among U.S. voters, in October, the share of poll respondents who rated immigration the number one problem rose to 14% from 8%. And I think that number will only increase as people like Kevin McCarthy and so many others have been very outspoken about the fact of we don't know who's crossing our border. And look what happened to Israel. We have to make sure that we are prepared. We don't know what kind of perhaps terrorist cells are here because of the open porous borders. So I could see that number increasing. There's like a 20-piece page that I thought it was linked on Drudge Report this morning. In Search of Kamala Harris. And it talks about her struggle to be, I guess, popular, or struggle to have any talk of her being president, essentially. So today is the first vote to pick speaker. It doesn't look like anybody has the numbers. Jim Jordan or Steve Scalise has the numbers yet. This is what's supposed to unfold today. They'll gather behind closed doors, meaning Republicans. First, they will vote on whether to change conference rules to raise the threshold to nominate a speaker and any other changes. Then, members will stand up to formally nominate a candidate and give a short speech. There'll be a secret ballot, and members can write in candidates. Results are counted by hand. If there are more than two candidates, the candidate with the lowest number of votes gets knocked out. Republicans would then vote on the top two. And just to show, because I know I predicted this in the media, but it wasn't a hard prediction, Republicans must overcome deep splits to choose a speaker as Israel crisis exposes failure to govern. As we mentioned, they were going to use this unseating, if you will, of Kevin McCarthy to use terms like chaos and the fact that we, as Republicans, quote unquote, cannot govern. Out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to Allison Hunt for being our guest on the program tomorrow. Congressman Joe Sempolinski. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, starting at 7.